Well, and we will have the second panel discussion. And I'd like to start this with saying that a bomb exploded in the business jet market in Russia. That related to changed regulations for domestic flights and changed customs regulations. So we challenged the legality of all these issues. So it was a big story. A lot of newspapers ran headlines about mafia ruling the business jet aviation sector, but the situation has improved, and today on this stage we have one of the leading aviation and customs broker of Russia, Stanislav Gallyamov, and he will tell us about the experience of the past 6 months. So what impact there will be on the market, how the situation will affect the beneficiaries or aircraft owners. So what has actually happened? Good afternoon to you all, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stanislav, and first and foremost I would like to thank you for inviting me here. You asked quite an interesting question, so let me answer it in the following way. We mostly interact with operators, not that much with aircraft owners. Aircraft owners just want to know that their aircraft are airworthy and they are fully in line with the regulations. So what happened in Sheremetyevo in 2018, so that event that you mentioned, it should have happened before that. So customs before used to resort to the simplest option it had in terms of processing things, and that bomb exploded in March in Sverojet in Domodedovo, and over the course of investigation it became clear which regulations were breached, and it became clear the 4 aircraft were arrested. It remains to be seen whether all the payments in relation to this aircraft have been made. Currently, 2 aircraft are released from this detention, and there were other developments since then, but that information has not been officially released yet. However, customs processing in business aviation market segment. So all these changes should have happened before. So we have been using this solution since summer. That solution was worked out in 2011, just nobody cared to use it. The customs code states that an international aircraft cannot fly on domestic flights without being properly cleared through customs, never mind what passengers this aircraft carries and whether this aircraft is being used for commercial purposes or not. This aircraft is not eligible for domestic flights on the territory of customs union countries. However, if the number of passengers and the list of passengers does not change, then the aircraft can fly across the countries of the customs union, and that flight is regarded as a domestic leg of an international flight. However, there is a risk there. So your aircraft can be detained, or you can face a hefty fine, which you will have to pay eventually in order to be able to keep operating your aircraft.
So we have some dilettantes here in the good sense of the words. I'll be asking simple questions that many would like to ask, and I'm not a true expert, so I understand the process in a general way, but here's what I'm interested in. How come that this process was or used to be out of control for some time, and at one point, so it happened overnight, and it had a major impact on the market, not only on transport market, but also on the market, or labor market got affected. So the number of flights declined rapidly. So why? What do you think? Why did it happen so sharply? So we were not prepared for it. So, or was it our general trend or tendency that it happens by leaps and bounds? Like over the last 10 years, our aviation, our business aviation, I would say that it became more legalized, with more permits now required, with other regulations now in place. And so there is still one piece that was uncovered, that was still kind of left untouched. I think it's quite simple, in fact. So practice of controlling commercial and non-commercial use, if we look at it into Europe or Israel and other countries and destinations, it exists there. In Russia and Russian customs, they're still learning, and they take a rich experience of, let's say, France, and they come to a certain opinion that they started reading their own regulations better, and after that they came to us and said, we'll start living in a new way starting tomorrow. Okay, greetings. Thank you for your help, for helping with this. Here's my question. We are all learning, we're all starting. So in law, you have this notion of grandfather's law. So back in 2011 or 2012, there was a decree, and it was supposed to be followed, but it was not followed. But then we started to follow it starting in 2017. So there was a holiday. So if there was no information available to the people, not everybody has a good legal back office. There should be a system to inform people. So how come it happened now in such a sudden way? What is your opinion? So customs people and other law enforcement people say, like, if you do not know the law, it is not free you from responsibility. But those who wanted, they knew. Back in 2012, I was invited to Moderator, where we discussed how their business jet could have been brought in for 30 days with minimal taxes. They knew how to do it at the time, but they followed the path of least resistance. So if it's possible to do it in the market, why are we going to do it different? But after the World Cup here, and after Decree 527 that was issued right before the World Cup, when they opened the sky of Russian Federation to business aviation, everybody started paying attention to that decree, including customs services. So during the World Cup, they said, like, look, we're not there. That should be properly documented. So at that time, they came up with a special customs procedure that was working. But when the World Cup was over, the same jets had to be registered. So they came and said, okay, we don't want to do it the old way. We will do it in a new ways. Here's a new decision. You have to follow it. And we started going back and forth, Vnukovo and Pulkovo, no, like we want to do it in the old ways, and then Sheremetyevo says, no, we need to do it in a new way, and then said, no, the old way was better, but Vnukovo said, no, we have to switch to the new way, until in March, there was some uproar, because there was a lot of non-payments, and investigative bodies established that fact. So that's when everybody decided we have to live in a new way. So why it happened, I don't know. I have not analyzed it. So I I was not picking on you. So, but if you remember at the exhibition, I spoke on this, and everybody told me, "Oh, we don't need this. We don't care. We don't give a spit." And there was only one operator who told us, "Yes, we want to be registered and we do it the right way." Okay, then I have this question. We have many operators here, some international operators. So there's a very simple question. Many of those operators, including ourselves, we work with service providers in the Russian Federation. We use those structures of Vnukovo, Sheremetyevo, Pulkovo, whatever. And we use agents who work with papers, with declarations, etc. And they pass through all the systems to get approved. So my question is very simple. We pay money to the owners of aircraft. I'm not talking about charters now. So when we ask them to provide a quality service, they tell us, yes, we will do it. And I would like to understand who's responsible: the owner who paid a 1 million fine, the operator, the structure, the terminal structure, or the agent, or that intermediary. So who works there? All of them. All of them. All of them are responsible for that situation. Okay, all those professionals are responsible. Listen, here's a good another example. You're still fly, and there's a decision by the commission by the number of 400, so about customs declaration. So you call in the old way, but it should be filled out in two copies. And if you don't have a copy in hands, and you said it's in the airport, it's in comport. Yes, but if you look at that ruling, so one is left at the customs, and then one you keep with yourselves. It's impossible. And I tell them it is possible. You should read the law. And it should be followed. If you're not doing this, then who's responsible then? Okay. So yes. So operators responsible. Liability according to the law. Maybe lawyers may correct me. Whoever acts may be liable. If you are acting legally, it's okay. If you are violating law, then it's your actions that violate law. It may be an organization, a structure, whatever. Okay, you may have an aircraft. So there's a fine, and then they flew to the States, they changed their registration, so they come back, they bring the craft back, and so there's this trail behind the craft, so to speak. So what do? So what about the customs officials in the Russian Federation? Have you had such cases? So we've had those instances for a long time. If you may be aware of that, with cars, for instance, when we have legal owners and we have no issues with them, but there's goods that were improperly imported. So the main issue is for the legal entity and their representatives who were making those actions. If an aircraft is imported legally, if it's legally purchased, but the person who violates the law, they're still liable. Of course, the aircraft can be arrested if the fine hasn't been paid. Of course, it should be done illegally, and before the aircraft is released again, like with Sferajet. So a case was opened against them, but aircrafts were owned by foreign companies, not by them, and they have agreements between them. But so with one of the clients, we worked through the situations, and he said, "Why me?" Well, because you have an agreement with them, a contract with them, with those operators, and they're involved, and they violated the law. And if And if the investigation establishes that you were participating in that violation, then you will be liable. Sorry for the interruption. So we are talking about buying and selling aircrafts, and when we buy or sell aircrafts for Russian citizens or whoever, it doesn't matter. So we need to check the register where the database. That information is not available. So if they're clean jets or not, we don't have such a database. And I will tell you even more. Customs officials. We have some limitations. So it's 3 years. So you can do it legally, but then 1 year later, it gets discovered that the operator violated the law using that aircraft. So there will be no protection for you in that case. So you should be better insured by investigating, the history of the plane. So I have this.
I think there are two elements in what you're saying. The first one, and I might shock a few people, but I don't particularly find offending that a billionaire who bought a private jet needs to import his aircraft where he lives. When you and I buy a car, you pay the VAT. So now that we know for a long time, rules were not necessarily applied equally in Russia, and it allowed this situation of flying domestic flights with foreign registered aircraft completely illegally. And I don't see that as being an outrageous issue, that now if you want to be able to do proper commercial flights within Russia, you need to import your aircraft in Russia. And obviously there are some short-term solutions for temporary importation that allows you to do things by the book. Now the second point, which was more related to the role of the operator. As an operator, we advise our client to import their aircraft. But we're not tax experts. They have plenty of tax lawyers that structure the deal for them, structure the company that will be holding and owning the aircraft. And this is not the operator's responsibility to make sure that the aircraft has been properly imported by the owner. It still remains his risk. Now, if the operator is using the aircraft that he knows is not being imported to do illegal charter within Russia, then yes, I agree. The operator should be, in this case, implicated. But we are not, things are already very complicated on every aircraft management transaction. That if we also have to become tax expert and guarantee to the owner that his setting is right for his own tax environment, we're never going to be able to do any more business.
Well, in fact, we've been working for a long time in this market, over 10 years. And in many deals, we participate in many deals when they were purchasing aircrafts. So when they purchased an aircraft, all companies have their legal departments. They either on the client side, on the seller side, or it can be a third party, and they look into the deal from the legal standpoint. And lawyers, from my perspective, they know global things, general things, but they may not know specifics. And so when you have financial guys, lawyers, customs brokers, and other interested parties, so in that discussion that takes place between them, you may find a way to ensure safety for the buyer of an aircraft, but not just aircrafts. I think that's the right way to go. When you should always have a discussion, a group discussion, where you look at different aspects of the deal. And lawyers should always be present and help operators, owners, because I'm asked, what about Kazakhstan? How can you do it? I don't know how to do it in Kazakhstan because I don't work there. I don't know their internal legislation in Kazakhstan. I can find a lawyer who will tell me, or they can recommend an operator to me. So legal support of any transaction or of any deal is very important, and it provides safety to the owner and helps them avoid possible problems. Can you tell me? So I have this question. So we talk to many operators, who have both commercial flights and non-commercial flights just for the owners. And it's a professional question for you as a customs broker. So now they say that the procedure is so complicated and so long that to combine those two things is very difficult in Russia. So as a broker, do you see improvements in terms of procedural issues? Perhaps you have to deal with this every day when in your staff, they deal with this, with customs clearance. So are there any improvements? Customs officials, are they able to do a better job, a faster job, or so the procedure is quicker, or it's still the same, it still takes a lot of pain to go through it, as we hear from market. It takes a lot of pain, a lot of headache, and the more we produce, the more paperwork you have, the more complicated it is in any customs office, whether it's Vnukovo or Sheremetyevo. So they come up with something new on a weekly basis. Now they tell us, now we need this from you. And it used to be simpler in the past. A crew would come to the VIP port.
Then the commander of the crew filed the general declaration. It was signed by the commander, then processed by the customs. Customs stamped this declaration, and crew commander was dismissed. So that was a pretty straightforward process, and everyone got used to it. However, toggling a particular customs mode in relation to a product or in relation to an aircraft takes more time. But my question was more about how customs respond to this. Is the customs using databases or applications? Is it trying to make some operational improvements to this procedure? Yes, I understand that the procedure is there, and that procedure dictates that you need to put an aircraft under a particular customs mode. But we all know that 4 or 5 hours in business aviation is a lot of time. So is customs moving towards expediting all these processes, or you do not see any sign of it now? So you're talking about automation, aren't you? Not about the automation per se. I'm talking about streamlining business processes. So is customs becoming more efficient, and is customs becoming more responsive? So do they have the right procedures in place, and are these procedures completed promptly? 3 months ago, the customs promised to issue guidelines for customs officers working across the Russian Federation, and that has not happened to date. So there is no improvement now. Customs are looking at this as a startup, and I have no idea how successful the startup will eventually be. Some of you may know already that the committee released a new guideline And under this guidelines, all aircraft above 28 tons in weight and with 19 passengers, with the number of passengers from 19 to 35, these aircraft can be put under this conditional customs mode. So I asked this question to a customs officer yesterday. So, this guideline contains definition of an aircraft from 20 to 35. If your aircraft have 18 passenger seats, then it does not fall under this regulation. Let's say your aircraft may have 18, so you need to add 2 more seats to make it carry 20 passengers instead of 18. And the question was, well, how are you going to check this? And they say that we will have to check this in detail. So we understand that this regulation relates to Boeings and Airbuses, and now we need the LOPA, and everyone needs to provide this LOPA now. So if your aircraft is registered in Europe, then we go to the website and look at who is authorized to validate this registration. So an answer to your question is this: customs are not streamlining their procedures now, so we need to join our efforts, create an association or whatever, and we have to make customs look in the right direction. Recently we had a letter from Ministry of Finance which stated that if the airworthiness certificate contains the word private, then rules for commercial aviation do not apply to this jet, and if there is no word private, then commercial aviation rules apply. And now the customs wants a breakdown by the planes for which we have, by the number of processed aircraft and what kind of and the type of aircraft that was processed. The Sferas jet is currently in trouble, and the customs, the Russian customs is not ready to be more and more open, and is not ready to make this procedure simpler. It's other way around. They are trying to make it more cumbersome and more complex. So you need to join your efforts. Join your efforts with other associations, with airport operators. So you need to create this momentum, because it takes more than one person or one company to wrestle, to strong arm the customs. It's not a one-man. It's not a one-man operation. I wanted to add another point here. Not only do we have this problem with aircraft, but we also have a similar problem with spare parts, because the customs office is very irresponsive. Even though some guidelines dictate that they should allow delivery of these spare parts, and then all the paperwork can be produced. But yes, we need to educate them through a joint effort. We need to educate them how to speed up these procedures, because this is the problem we frequently face. Like, for example, in the regions, customs officers have absolutely no idea about the right way of clearing aviation spare parts through customs. They They don't know what paperwork needs to be prepared, and normally they understand what to do after an item was already in the warehouse for some time, and that involves a lot of cost. So the question is, what should a foreign operator do? Let's say you are a foreign operator, you operate an aircraft, and that aircraft is owned by somebody from Russia, and the owner of the aircraft flies domestically and also has international flights. What should that operator do? I think that operator needs to do a number of things. First and foremost, that operator needs to have credible partners at your destinations, not necessarily in Belarus, Kazakhstan, or Russia. But that operator needs to have customs brokers or legal advisors on board as partners. Let's say when I travel to a foreign country, I need to know what I can or cannot carry in my luggage. Like, for example, you can travel to Thailand now, but 15-inch MacBook Pro cannot be allowed on board. So I will not take that with me. So you can only help yourself. Crystal, I have a question to you. Some serious changes happened in the market, and these changes will have an impact on insurance. So you work in Russia for quite a long time. So what is your take on this process? All aircraft are insured, aren't they? And
so let's start first with the status of the market today. Sorry, I'm going to remove this. The aviation insurance market is in big turmoil, so it doesn't only impact Russian market on the insurance matter, the aircraft insurance here, but all over the world. So basically, what we are seeing now for the next 3-4 years, we are seeing a very big change, a big change in paradigm of this insurance market that has been decreasing and softening since 20 years almost, 19 years exactly. So now things are going to become harder and harder for all kind of reasons, because the market is in big losses since few years. In addition to that, you have the main big loss that you heard this year that happened, like the Boeing one, but as well as other one that you may not have heard, but the 787 engines losses. So it creates a big gap in the profit of in the results of the insurers. So all this said, you have to insure your aircraft. You as operator, you have to insure your fleet. The first thing is, like you just mentioned before, like with the lawyer, let's talk about the Russian market, because we are here for that. You have to stick with what is legal. Your insurance must be aligned. Your coverage must be aligned with your structure, your operation, whether it is private, public transport. It has to be linked to what you are doing, operationally speaking. Otherwise, you will not be covered. If you are breaching the law, the insurer can reject a claim. A few years ago, when they were earning money, let's say some claims that could be, in between, let's say, no claims are perfectly clear, in the mind of the insurers. For us, it's clear. For you, it's clear. But the insurers are here not to pay. That's the rules. Their rules, let's say. But, the most important is to make sure you are correctly covered to avoid as much gap as possible. So what I would suggest is you do, let's say, set up your insurance very much in advance now, taking care into account the new status of the market. Otherwise, the insurer will use any argument, any any point they could find to, let's say, reject your claims, whether it is a small claim and, of course, if it's a big claim. So I strongly advise that you really pay attention, have a good partner, and a good advice, because, as you know, if you have, let's say, local, you have to go through local insurers if you are, in Russia, insured in Russia. So you need to first have a good partner, and then to have, the right setup of your coverage. If it is about a foreign operator, having some Russian owner, there is a lot, then, as well, you need to pay attention how, your coverage will be set up. It really, really matters today. Again, the insurers are losing money, so they will try whatever they can not to pay. So.
Okay, thank you. Florent, I would like to ask you really once again, like a dilettante but from Russia. How do you feel with all this in Russia? Like a foreign operator, how do you feel? Because, we can explain different things in law, but how do you feel like European person on this market with all these changes?
I can't say we were very, very surprised. Again, I think, so we operate out of Switzerland. And we face the same issues in Switzerland, except it's a much smaller country. So except when you fly from Geneva to Zurich, you pretty much never have to do internal flights in Switzerland. But, when one of our clients comes with an aircraft, we have to work through the European importation first. Then we have to look into the importation into Switzerland. Now, I think the challenge you guys are facing in Russia, and we are, as a matter of fact, facing in Russia, is that we don't know exactly how it's going to play. And that uncertainty is terrible for business. And you always have to remember that in this environment, an operator, needs to account his risk versus the reward. And, people were discussing about the shortage of aircraft and the difficulty of the charter market. It's the same thing with operator at the moment, where we are facing challenges in terms of everything being more complicated and more risky for less reward. So, I would say at least we can enjoy the hospitality of our Russian friend. That's a good start.
Do you feel the pressure from your customers? So the pressure because of these complicated procedures and so on, that it take a lot of time and...
Yes, of course. They look at the operator as you need to fix it. It's your job to fix it. And we also feel the pressure because it's a very competitive environment. And we know some operators will look the other way and allow the client to do what he wants. And so, the clients are very keen and very prompt to remind us that. But, TAG Aviation is definitely not the biggest operator in Russia. And there's probably a reason why. And I think our clients understand that we're doing the best, but we are also here to protect their interest. And, when an aircraft is seized by the customs, can you imagine the impact on the owner and on his operation? So that reinforces in our ability to tell the client that there will be limitations. They're not ours, but we will follow the rules.
Thank you. So I think
Спасибо. Well, I think from discussing customs issues, we can move to discussing how that changed the sales market.
Idris, I would like to ask you, do you feel in Switzerland some changes maybe with your Russian clients because of these customs issues and something like this?
Sorry, can you just repeat?
do you feel some changes with your Russian clients in terms of buying and selling aircraft, maybe with your Russian clients, because of these customs issues?
I mean, look, Aviaprop is a broker specialized in PC-12. And I guess as of today in Russia, you have 5 or 6 PC-12, which is very few. So definitely, I think that Russia, at least for Aviaprop, is a region that we need to develop. I always say to my customer that, PC-12 for first-time buyer is a perfect aircraft when you come to turboprop, because you have very low operating cost and nothing really high, so you don't take that much risk. And yeah, I mean, definitely, I think definitely Russia is a country that we need to look at.
Okay, Mikhail, tell me what you think about it. So, do your customers feel an impact of the changes in the customs mode? Well, all customers are concerned and they face a lot of uncertainty. And how does that impact your business? Customers tend to scrutinize the history of an aircraft more and more. Customers keep asking more questions, trying to clarify whether the previous operator used the aircraft, whether the previous operator did not compromise the aircraft. So there are lots of indemnity clauses and so on. So how do you handle this? It was mentioned here already. There are no databases, no way to check this. Yes, indeed, there is no way to check this. Just make sure that you draft your contract in the right way and enlist a proper lawyer to provide you with the legal support. So that can reduce your risk. Okay, then another question. Do you think that all these complications may finally result in the fact that here in Russia we will have more domestic operators?
We will have new players. Many, I think, should agree with me that Russia, compared to Europe, follows its own path, and the market is becoming more and more civilized. And now everybody discussing canceling VAT. So if that happens, our internal domestic market will become even more interesting, both for commercial operators and for the owners who mostly use domestic flights. Okay, I have the next question. You recently announced an operator, so it's still in the process, but I already read about that. So it was a coincidence that you decided to be more active on the domestic market, or that customs situation was a catalyst for you to switch to it? No, if you follow your records, if you look at the records of this workshop 2 or 3 years ago, many spoke about it before. Everybody said that Russian players in business aviations are going to Asia, to Europe, they bring their clients, they buy companies in Europe, etc. But we did the opposite thing. We came from Europe here, and for us, as part of our strategy, from the start, developing a Russian market of business aviation, started with small aviation and going forward. So it's one of our priorities. And what happened with our partners in the industry, in fact, it's a sad thing, but at the same time it coincided with our activities. It coincided with the development and the greater interest towards lighter planes and smaller jets in Russia. So we do represent producers here who actively would like to introduce those products and bring them to Russia. And to promote them, we as dealers And as representatives of manufacturers, we need to give something to the clients. And what can I give them? I can give them a plane that has no certification. Of course, I should launch that process to get certification in place and to make sure the plant, the manufacturer, is able to deliver those planes to Russia in the future. And to whom? Of course, let's come together. Let's create a company and purchase together. So nobody was willing to do it, so we did it on our own and provided those planes to our brokers and those services. If you need a small jet, okay, we have it, a small a turbo propeller plane, no problem. Well, Florent, I have a question for you, an interesting one, I hope. So back in those times, many European companies went to Dubai, created operators there, local operators in partnership or on their own. Many entered China on their own or in partnerships. They started companies, and that was happening also because of regulatory things like inside those countries. Do you think we will see a process in the future that European companies will enter Russia and will try to create here an operator just like the way they did in the Middle East or in China for their clients, or the Russian market is so is too risky for Europeans or too small that nobody will be doing that? What is your perspective on this?
I think it's a very good question. I can tell you that internally we've had discussions about that. It's something that we talked about a few times, because I think, and especially when hearing the previous panel and the lack of good aircraft available for charter within the country, there is definitely a potential for growth and for demand in this market. Now, it's always the question of finding the right partner to do it. Because as you know, in those structures where the historic operator doesn't control the majority of the new company is creating, then obviously you need to find the right partner to do it. But it is probably one way to explore, since starting from scratch seems to be very time-consuming and very difficult to get an AOC. So I think for foreign operator, it will be very difficult to start from scratch. So it will be much smarter to find the right partner to develop something. But again, it's about finding the right person that fits with the philosophy and the ethos and the mindset of your own company.
Thank you for that. I think that at this positive note, I think, so if you write the right partner, then European operators are willing to come to Russia. So at this we will conclude our discussion. Thank you all very much for participating in it. And Yuri will join us now. Thank you very much, colleagues.